We've um, gone from the past to the present, and today we're entering into the future. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started, and I introduce to you our speaker today. If you can please put your name and your BARD number in the chat if you're seeking CLEs today, we'd really appreciate it. And then I want to give a thank you to the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association Board for helping to put this all together. And that includes Nikki Berry, Sonia Gipson Rankin, Asia Brooks, Sarah Thompson, Eulalia Kafari, and Felicia Adams. Today's speaker is Sonia Gipson Rankin. She's a legal scholar and educator whose work combines her background in computer science with her passion for legal justice. She teaches at UNM School of Law in the fields of torts, family law, technology and the law, and introduction to lawyering. Professor Gipson Rankin Scholarship bridges technology and law. Her artificial intelligence and algorithms scholarship has been in the Washington and Lee Law Review, NYU Law Review Online, Wisconsin Law Review, Nature Reviews, Electrical Engineering, and the ABA SciTech magazine. She's also published on themes of race, experiential learning, and family law issues. In addition to her academic contributions, Professor Gipson Rankin is deeply engaged in advancing equity and justice. She's an American Bar Foundation Fellow. She serves on the New Mexico Supreme Court Commission on Equity and Justice, and she's a former president of the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association. She's also a founding member of the Interdisciplinary Working Group on Algorithm Justice, a collaborative effort between computer scientists, legal scholars, and social scientists to advise policymakers on AI-related issues. Her insights on legal, political, and tech issues have been featured in international, national, and local media outlets. You'll often see her on television and newspapers and on podcasts. She frequently addresses a wide range of topics, including technology, constitutional law, kinship care, criminal justice reform, inclusive leadership, and Black community empowerment. She's been recognized for her many contributions, including receiving the Woman of Influence Award in 2018 and winning the Garrett Flickinger Faculty Excellence Award in 2021-2022. Her mission is to inspire students, communities, and systems to seek justice with the spirit of excellence and to read comic books. She's provided CLEs to the judicial education lectures to lawyers and judges around the country. She's been a guest speaker at many universities and other agencies and entities around the country as well. It is my honor to present to you today's amazing speaker, New Mexico Black Lawyers Association board member, and my fabulous mentor and friend, Professor Sonia Gipson Rankin.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just so honored. And I'm always glad to be in this time and space with this particular community. I'm so grateful to be a member of the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association and to have had this relationship with this organization for decades. So it's just an honor. I'm going to put a couple of documents in the chat. I thought you might like some things to look at and some things that we can kind of play with. So just give me 1 second. I want to get you some things we'll be looking at. But one's a handout that will have some documents that will follow along with some cases that I've been following. And one is going to be a statute here in New Mexico that was authored by some really great people I know. So we'll chat about those later, but you might want to grab those documents, open them up so you can check them out. But let's get into this topic. And I'm so grateful to our wonderful organization to give me this time and space. This is a paper I'm working on that will be hopefully coming out through the Duke Law and Contemporary Problems Law Review. And so I had a great time presenting it there. I've done some other versions of this information for the National Association of Women Judges and for the UNM AI Summit. So I've had a great chance to talk about it, but just preparing for today got me to this newer topic, right? Pixelated justice. And we're going to talk a little bit about deepfakes, bias, and the fight for fairness. So what does this look like? Well, there was a conference that recently had a guest say this phrase, and it really stood out to me. We are fast approaching a tipping point where non-human content will vastly outnumber the amount of human-generated content. Now, this is a pretty interesting conference that was happening, because they're trying to think about this idea of what we see and what is made available and what content will fill the internet, this thing that kind of guides so much of our day to day. And one idea is what's on the internet. The other is what appears in what we call newspapers or magazines, what's on television, what sounds do we hear through our audio podcast, and even what kind of images are going to be projected through virtual reality. If you get a chance, I encourage you, go over to the Apple Store and sign up. They've got a half-hour demo where you get to put on the Apple virtual reality and see what it's like. You can also head over to Best Buy and try out the other versions of the products and kind of see what's happening in terms of this augmented reality that we are very, very close to having occur. So, but what does it look like just as it relates to images and ideas? And I wanted to give you something that I thought was kind of interesting. This just happened earlier this year. There was a Hong Kong-based employee who was tricked by a multi-person video conference where everyone else was fake. However, everyone on the Zoom or the video conference he was on looked like his employer and all of the team of leadership, who was instructing him spot by spot how to transfer the equivalent of $25 million to some other accounts. He earnestly, honestly, with all full integrity, believed it was his employer that he was on the video conference with. Now, we're watching some interesting things about voice cloning that has also been occurring all over the world. In the United Arab Emirates, criminals have been cloning the voices of a company director that led to a $35 million heist. I'm picturing that being one of the most interesting movies to ever occur. In Mumbai, a businessman fell victim to a voice cloning that involved a fake call from the Indian embassy in Dubai. In Australia, scammers employed a voice clone of the Queensland Premier Stephen Miles to attempt to trick the person to invest in Bitcoin. And in the United States, teenagers' voices have been cloned, and her parents were manipulated into complying with demands, believing that it was a kidnapping. I actually know a few people that this has happened to in real life. So here's what we're going to chat about today, right? The power of images, how deepfakes work, bias in AI images, and some of the deeper roots, and tech and legal solutions, and then some call to action, some things that you and I can do in the practice of law and in the tech community, and just in our day-to-day. Now, you may have ever heard about this. Who's heard of the Kodak Shirley cards? This was the model that started from Kodak in terms of how to decide if the image's projection was correct. Now, Kodak, we know that hopefully somebody out there still has a few stocks of Kodak, but this is one of the standard bearers of images and film and the creation of photographs that we know and think of today. And in order to know if the color was correct, they met this woman. This is not Shirley, but the first model's name was Shirley, and she was seen as the standard image by which all photographs would be determined if people were properly lit or not. And so there would be a number of different, quote, Shirleys over the years, but it was this idea that if it doesn't look good on Shirley, then the picture imagery did not come out correct. Take it back to the dark room and try to get the color schemes back corrected. Now, as you can imagine, every Shirley that was used as a model was always a white woman with particular phenotype, particular hair texture, and particular pigmentation. This made it very challenging, as you can imagine, to get images that would best project and portray individuals of different pigmentations. Now, let's think a little bit about that, right? I want you to have that understanding of some of the foundational parts of photography and image in mind as we take just a little glance into how deep fakes work. So we'll talk a little bit about the technology, some different types of deep fake, and we'll do some definition setting just so we can have a good foundation. Deep fakes. Here are some terms that I think will be pretty helpful for you. Deep fake refers to fabricated or altered but realistic audio, videos, or images made using software. And this is from the National Center of State Courts, their AI Rapid Response Team interim guide that just came out June of 2024. It's included in the materials if you click on that. But this is the definition of deep fakes. Now, something else we'll talk about a little bit later, I want you to just keep in mind, is this idea of non-consensual synthetic intimate imagery. And that in shorthand of NSII, it refers to digitally altered content that is fake, but depicts the faces, bodies and or voices of real people. And we'll talk about why that's a little bit different than a straight deep fake, which is just a completely untrue image, versus some image of me that has been altered and it uses actual humans in some way. And this is from a really fascinating paper you might want to check out from the Association of Computer Machinery on non-consensual synthetic intimate imagery, prevalence, attitudes, and knowledge in 10 different nations. So let's step back a little bit, right? And I want us to have a sense of how some of the technology works in some vernacular and language that might make some sense to you. You might remember, this is funny, this was my job talk. I'm ever so grateful to the University of New Mexico School of Law. And I had this idea in 2018. I think I want to try and explain this idea of general adversarial networks. I think there's something in here that the law might want to pay attention to. So I'm so grateful to have gotten some good guidance on some cutting edge topics. But here's how generative adversarial networks work. You can imagine there the detective. You've got you see a picture there of kind of our old dear friend Sherlock Holmes. It's a detective, and this detective is very good. This detective is the best, and this detective can very quickly and accurately detect a real image from a fake image in the blink of an eye. This detective doesn't get it wrong. And what we do to kind of train the detective is we're going to present real data, and the detective is going to say, aha, that's real, that's a real picture, and we totally trust it. But at the same time that this detective has a baseline of real data, the detective also is being attacked by a generator, kind of considered to be a forger. And this forger is a terrible artist, right? Could you imagine painting blindfolded where you don't even quite know how close am I to the Mona Lisa? Who knows if I've even picked the right color? And the generator is being fed information that is sheer nonsense, to tell you the truth. It's white noise. It's not even decipherable. It's the bit of a thought. It's just completely gibberish. And the generator is taking that gibberish and saying, aha, is this the Mona Lisa? And the detective's like, obviously not. That looks nothing like the Mona Lisa. And the generator takes that information and feeds it back and says, all right, we got to tweak it a little bit more. And the next image comes up and says, aha, is this the Mona Lisa? And the detective says, no, that's a cat. Okay, take it back. And is this the Mona Lisa? No, that's Sonia. And it goes over and over and over again. And the generator is getting smarter and smarter and smarter and better and better and better until this does actually happen. The generator creates an image that looks exactly like the real data. And our detective says, aha, it's the real data. I trust it. This is how the systems work. This is how it's making all of these exciting images when it puts a cat filter over your face, when it is able to put lipstick on. The zoom feature allows you to put makeup on or grow a goatee if you want. All of these things, this is how it works. It makes a billion terrible choices before it makes the really, really good one. So what does that look like, right? Well, here's a little bit about how deep fakes at that next level work, right? We take that original face, we run it through an encoder. This is within the space of the neural networks and the machine learning, and it's going to get like a base latent face, and it goes back through a decoder and it creates a reconstructed face that looks exactly like our original face. That's step one. This is just understanding the process of how it takes what that image is, it understands every little piece about it at the latent face stage and brings it back to you. So what do we do next? Well, now we need to get something to compare to, right? And so you can see at the top, our original face ends up looking exactly like our reconstructed face. You'll see on the bottom, our original face B ends up looking exactly like our reconstructed face B at the end. And it's understanding this distinction to just get a sense of some foundations. And then what we can do is swap some things around. Now we can start to do some things that aren't actually built into the way the person looks, right? We can understand some distinctions, and we want to make some changes with our latent face A and latent face B, and we're able to change a little bit. And you'll notice on the right-hand side that they're able to reconstruct face A using things that it learns from latent face B. And vice versa, we can reconstruct face B from some things we learned from face A. So this is pretty cool. This is actually super cool in the world of tech. And we're able to combine what the technology can do with the next set of things that you and I might want to manipulate it to finish, right? So can you imagine, right, having just this, we need to take a man with glasses, we need to subtract man, we need to add woman to create woman with glasses. And some of the early images and the work that it did with this, ooh, there, it looks like a woman with glasses at a glance. Without my glasses, it definitely looks like it, but you can kind of see the development over time where we can get from words to tell it to change some features to create something that doesn't exist already. Now, some of the first sets of images where this first got created, ooh, they were scary. They were very scary to look at. But now it is better and better and so intense that just like that gentleman in Hong Kong or the gentleman in India or the people in Dubai, you cannot tell the difference between an original human that you might know and the image that's in front of you. So we get to lots of different types of deepfakes and use cases, right? There's audio deepfakes where we take your voice and manipulate it to say something you didn't. There's video deepfakes, there's images, and then there's also text. Now, we know in the legal community, people have long been creating text deepfakes. In fact, Judge Shamara Henderson, our Court of Appeals judge in here in New Mexico, comes and teaches our first-year law students about how easily and how concerning it is how falsified evidence can be presented in trials and the legal requirements that attorneys need to do for watch for falsified evidence and false emails and false text messages. How easily can it happen and what is our legal responsibility? But I say that to say that really it can be used in all kinds of ways for good. So here's some things that we could do for good right now. Remember, we've got deep fakes, we've got synthetic images. Now, deep fakes will be something that doesn't exist at all, right? That man minus man with glasses minus man plus woman equals woman with glasses. That was an example of completely a deep fake. Didn't exist at all. But more specifically, what if we take me and do things, right? So I work with a great colleague of mine from William and Mary Law School, great scientist there, Professor Daniel Shin, and I gave him 100 pictures of mine, and he created a totally safe, trustworthy sandbox. I said, Professor Shin, this is me living all over the world in my regular human life. Now, colleagues, I don't have a big, exciting life. I keep it pretty straightforward. But I said, I'd like to create some different kinds of scenarios and put me in some adventures I have not had. So here is Sonia and her many non-adventures. I said, can you make a picture of me being on a stage? And that's all he typed in. After he got those images, make Sonia a musical artist. Have Sonia gardening. I don't garden. What about Sonia at the grocery store? Well, that's kind of possible to occur. What about Sonia rock wall climbing? That is not going to happen very often. What about Sonia at a coffee shop? Now, it took all of this from just that sentence of put Sonia, the images you've gotten, into some different spaces. And then I decided, well, those are things that I normally do. I mean, I don't always do. I have been to a coffee shop. I have been to a grocery store. What about some things I tend to normally do? And it's like, well, here's Sonia teaching a class. I have never been in that classroom. And here's what I did do, colleagues. I did send them lots of pictures of me with my hair in different ways. Big hair, small hair, flat hair, straight hair, curly hair, braids, twists, whatever. So that can be part of the database. Here's me performing my Simone Biles in the Olympics. But these are actually my favorites. Sonia on the deck in Star Trek, right? Put me in some place I may not have actually been. What does this mean, right? Those are fun things. Those are silly things. Those are things that, I've always wanted to be able to draw myself, but could I ever, when we think about this idea of people creating vision boards, ooh, this is kind of interesting. What if your vision board actually wasn't just pictures of other famous people doing things, but it was you rock wall climbing. It was you giving $1 million pitch for a company. It was you sitting on the Supreme Court in a robe, right? What if it was you and you could actually visualize and see that, right? There's all kinds of unique things we're looking at. But we are always, colleagues, as attorneys in the legal community, thinking about potential threats and legal implications. I want to go through 3 different ones that really have been catching my attention. One is misinformation and defamation. Now, we know that we're always very concerned about misinformation, just some of the things that we watch for in political elections, in just interactions with individuals. How did they get their information? Is it true or is it not true? How quickly do people respond to it? The other one is what happens with defamation? What if that deep fake has me saying something I would not have ever said or would have never actually presented? You know, you may have seen this case out of, I believe it's the state of Virginia, in which a high school principal, came across a video online, a white male high school principal, there was an audio of him that went out, had him saying a lot of very derogatory and inflammatory things about Black Americans, what he thought about Black students at his school, how much he disregarded them, really inflammatory terms and choices. And he was put on suspension almost immediately. Anyone who heard it absolutely knew it was his voice, except it wasn't. There was an incident with the high school the high school athletic director who was upset at this principal and created at home a false deep fake audio of the principal saying racist things that he had not said. And you can think about how rapidly this gentleman's determination had been, or how rapidly the school responded to this, what appeared by all indications, a true video of the principal that was completely not true. So we're watching that case that's unfolding right now. We're also intrigued with this understanding of election interference concerns. And this has been a little bit fascinating because a lot of what states were doing, and New Mexico included, we'll talk about that, it's in the attachment I gave you, but we'll talk about this very real concern that a lot of places had about election interference with deepfakes. Now remember, not just video deepfakes or audio deepfakes, but just information and what this could do to election concerns. So the state of New Mexico, Oregon, Florida, California, quite a few states all came up with election interference deepfake bills that passed, much of it at the beginning of the calendar year in anticipation of the 2024 election. And we did not see as much of what we thought we would see, which is kind of falsified images flooding the airways or audio instances. But we saw something a little bit deeper that is really going to have to be unpacked intentionally in the next couple of years about what was happening behind the scenes with deepfakes and bots, which we've always kind of been studying through social media and some of those areas. Another area, though, of grave concern, and this is in the materials I have for you, is related to privacy and consent with the creation of deepfakes. So millions of people are using abusive AI to nudify bots online. Now, what does that actually look like, right? Well, what the bots are able to do is, take an image of anyone and put them in a compromising position that they would not have agreed to, nor do they consent to actually have created. Why does this get concerning? Well, you could imagine, imagine your high school yearbook, your middle school yearbook, and someone just takes the copy of the picture of you in the middle school yearbook and puts it in a very, very a situation you would not want, or embarrassing, or in some of these instances where they take off all the clothes and they put them in compromising positions. We used to talk about this a lot inside of this previous language of, quote, revenge porn. This is if there was two people in an intimate relationship, they agreed to take intimate pictures of each other, and then there's a breakup of some kind, and one party will share the pictures of the other, actual true images or video or audio, etc. That is considered, we don't use the phrase revenge porn, that's not appropriate terms. What we are focusing on is non-consensual intimate images and the extension audio, video, etc. But it falls under this idea of there are efforts in some of the states and across the country and across the world to criminalize that particular kind of harm. But we're seeing something different now, which is not just a former partner took images that I did legally give them, that I've revoked the right for them to distribute in that way. But now we're looking at non-consensual synthetic intimate images, NSII. And so the materials I gave in front of you is something kind of interesting that's happening out of the city of San Francisco. The city attorney, David Chiu, and many other colleagues have sued a number of companies because of their failure to watch over what is happening with the creation of non-consensual synthetic intimate images through their portals. So what's very interesting, when you go through the complaint, you'll see that some of it has been redacted because of, so that people don't look this up and now go to these websites to do things, but they do kind of give a really clear picture about the implications of the misuse of open source AI image generation to create fake pornographic and sexual abuse content depicting real, identifiable women and girls, or what we call so-called deepfake pornography or deep nudes. This is some of the what we're kind of watching for. And so right now, there's about, if I'm not mistaken, there's 5 different companies that they have sued. They're talking about the development and misuse of the technology and going under causes of action. The first one, violations of business and professions code against all the defendants of unlawful, unfair, or fraudulent business act or practice. Also under the defendants they're arguing that they violated the California Civil Code section 1708.86B1, prohibiting the creation and intentional disclosure of non-consensual sexually explicit images or aided and abetted in that. Also, violation of, oh yes, an additional cause of actions related to all of these areas. So that's a very interesting, very important case that is going forward. What we do know is that the data shows by and large that the majority of non-consensual synthetic intimate images are being done against women. In particular, they're being done against famous women, but also just everyday women, children in middle school, children in elementary school. Now, this is different. This is different than just creating images of children in pornographic positions, right? This is an additional kind of area of concern, which is what you'll see in the next page of the handout that I have for you, which is another case that I'm following. This was filed in May 15th of this year in Wisconsin. This is in the United States District Court for the Western District of Wisconsin, USA versus our defendant. And the allegation is that the individual knowingly produced at least one visual depiction that depicted a minor engaging in sexually explicit conduct. Now, this was not an actual human child that was then morphed into this. This was that he just straight up used AI to create a person that was a minor and then to put them in this sexually explicit conduct image. We actually have had our first conviction related to this over the pond, across the pond. In England, they have convicted the first individual who has done some of this work. And I did try to contact them to ask for a copy of the case, but the judges there, they were not quite as ready yet to share the pages with me. So when I get more, I'll definitely share it with you. But these are some of the things we're watching as it relates to privacy, consent. Has an individual agreed that just because my picture is able to be found online, it can then be taken? So we're looking at issues of copyright and fair use and many other kind of categories. So challenges to evidence authenticity. This is where it comes back to us in the legal space, is that we're trying to figure out the impact of deepfakes on the Federal Rules of Evidence 901 in particular. And so there's some ideas of what people are presenting. This is in the first couple of pages that I have for you. In terms of what they're thinking about using the Federal Rules of Evidence to go forward, right? You know, you're supposed to tell the truth. You're supposed to present things that you've done your due diligence to find. And really the goal that we're seeing is, can we get some of these things handled through pre-trial evidentiary hearings? That if you're preparing to present something in court, don't even let the jury get a glimpse of it. How could we just get all of this handled so that we don't have the back and forth of a jury seeing, or a trier of fact seeing, this actual evidence that could be proven to be deep fake, that could be proven, or there's some uncertainty of whether or not it's true or not. And so this is going to be really important for everyone in the legal community and in the tech community to be looking for and preparing to interact with experts for expert testimony, forensic analysis, and really that chain of custody of that image or that audio and where it came from, where it started. Now, as you can imagine, there's a lot of concerns about this, but let me show you a kind of a deep fake that I thought was kind of a fun thing to do. And this is a video of me. And of course, the sound is doing something. Hold on.
with opposing counsel, and they want to settle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hola, gracias por venir hoy. Buenas noticias. Me reuní con el consejo opuesto y quieren llegar a un acuerdo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hallo, danke, dass du heute gekommen bist. Gute Nachrichten. Ich habe mich mit dem gegnerischen Anwalt getroffen und sie möchten sich einigen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 你好，很感谢您今天能来。好消息，我见了对方律师，他们想要和解。1、2、3、4、5。
Now, I am using Duolingo to try and beef up my Spanish, but my German is very bad. I've only taken one semester of Mandarin in my life. So how could this be a great thing? Well, we can imagine all the ways this could make a huge difference with your clients, all the ways that this could really bring some opportunities that we haven't used before. So deepfakes aren't all bad, right? I could envision myself rock wall climbing. Just a heads up, the AI had a really hard time. My dear colleague made all kinds of models of me. The AI is like, Sonia has never been on a mountain like that before. It couldn't find anything relative in the pictures I presented in order to get me rock wall climbing. But we could do some pretty fun, great, exciting things. But we do need to be mindful about concerns of how it could be used in a very wrong way. So what can we do to address some of these issues, right? What are some technological solutions? What are some legal and ethical responses that we're seeing? One is McAfee, right? You guys have probably even forgotten about some of these great cybersecurity tools that we have on our machines. The importance of being aware of ransomware attacks or hacking or any kind of nefarious actors that might occur. Well, these cybersecurity companies are still doing a lot of unique things. And McAfee's come up with a new tool that they argue can detect AI-generated audio. So you give it an audio and it's able to determine how much of it is true or not. Well, we are seeing other examples of this in other places, but please, please, please be aware that a lot of these, quote, AI detection tools are still in the development phase. They're still in the development phase, right? I always think about this notion. How many of you remember radar detectors, right? This notion that you can't go to certain states, or you want to make sure in case the police are trying to track down if anybody's speeding here. Well, they'll put on a, they'll use a radar to detect your speed. Well, you need a radar detector to know if they're using a radar, but certain states said you can't have a radar detector. So then the police had to come up with a radar detector. And then they had a response that where people would say, fine, I'll use a, oh gosh, of course I'm forgetting the word. I'll use a different type of detector to tell if the cops have a radar detector. And so now we have this back and forth between the different products that are made to catch the next way people are trying to work around and within the boundaries of the law. So this is something though that McAfee is trying, and many cybersecurity companies are trying to come up with ways to detect if audio is fake, if images are fake, if text is fake, if whatever's in front of us has been created through artificial intelligence. There's something else that the legal community, judges in particular, have been asking for. When I have presented this in front of judges, I talked about this in with the South Carolina judiciary, when I spoke with the National Association of Women Judges. They both expressed grave concerns as it relates to deepfakes and the practice of family law. Well, I was very happy when they were focused on that area. But in particular, if you know that area, you know that it comes with a lot of evidence. It comes with complex evidence. It comes with people wanting to present something off of their phone or share an audio message they received. And, we have such a large number of pro se clients in the state of New Mexico and in other places across the country that there's a lot of people who are like, all I've got is what's this device right in front of me. And the judges said because of the depth and the amount and the scope of the kind of evidence that's presented in front of them, that is very concerning to them that they're not going to be able to tell if that image, that audio, that et cetera, that's been presented in front of them was made by deepfake or if it was accurate, if it was modified in some kind of way, or if they can actually trust it. So some things that they're thinking about is this idea of proactive watermarking, right? That while something is being created, it is automatically being watermarked, and that we'll be able to come back and dig in right away and pull out and see exactly if something's been AI generated or not, with something that you and I would not hear with the human ear or even with some kind of support, but that can be ding detected by an AI generator detector. Something else, if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see again that the language we kind of started with, right? Getting that discriminator, that detective, and what is generating it and what it could look like to actually put some stopgaps in the way so that we can definitely tell if something has been watermarked or has, more critically, has been created with an AI generator. So once again, this is something that the judges are asking for. This is something that the tech community is actively working on. But colleagues, remember this, just because the tech community is working on solving this, there are also people in the tech community who are working on the next thing so that that watermark can be taken off. So this is going to be, once again, that back and forth with the radar detector. Something else that we're looking at, it is a framework for collaborative solutions. Now, this is on the last pages of the handout that I have for you. And this is from, I thought this was really interesting, the electronic discovery reference model, where they have a couple of ideas of how the tech community and the legal community can work in concert. So one thing they're thinking about is, you've got your data, you load your data on your e-discovery platform, it goes to your legal practitioners, but before it gets anywhere near in front of the actual trier of fact and the actual legal, the actual courtroom, if you will, it's got to go through AI deepfake detection. And we're going to do lots of things so that that data that's been given. We need data verification. We need data explainability. Ooh, this is a big one that we think about, of course, in the legal community, which is understood differently in the tech community. So that's actually an issue. We're going to need the forensic experts who have gone through it before it is ever considered verified data. So as opposed to those judges who are just looking at this mountain of evidence in front of them, trying to say, can I believe it? Don't put anything in front of them that has not been through some of these levels of care and review, right? So once it's verified data, take that data used in various legal procedures, put it wherever it's got to go, then it enters litigation. And it is something that we can say, this data has been through all of our checks and balances, all of our markers, and Your Honor, triers of fact, you can trust what's in front of you. That's when it goes in front of the court system, as opposed to us trying to do it way down here in front of the judges and in front of the jury, trying to determine if that evidence is valid or not. So here's another idea that I think is kind of a nice one that I really think is more doable than not. Now, remember, this data verification, forensic experts, and data explainability, that's going to be a tricky one for a few years as we still try to figure out how do we know what's there. Now, I asked my dear colleague, Daniel, I said, I want to try something. I want to see, could we put me in a position I've never been in? And this was Vice President Kamala Harris giving a speech. And I said, can you take a video of me? He took a video of me giving a talk, and then he was able to create this.
Leaders who are here, I want to thank you all for the work that you do to uphold one of our nation's highest ideals, the ideal of freedom. Freedom, I believe, is fundamental to the promise of America. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom of assembly, the freedom to vote. In America, freedom is not to be given. It is not to be bestowed. It is ours by right. By right.
Now, why is this so fascinating? Ooh, I'm going to add in some of those mannerisms. I think I really love the way Vice President Harris carries herself. I like the suit. I like the hair. The video I gave him was me with a very short haircut. I had about probably 3 inches of hair. But what got me is the facial mannerisms. I've not blinked that way. I've not done my body or my facial expressions in that way. And with just a very short video clip and, this idea, well, did it help because it was my skin tone, which is similar to Vice President Harris's skin tone. I've seen videos that he has done that has mapped himself, a person of South Korean descent, onto a white German, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, how does that look like Professor Shin, right? It's pretty impressive, the kinds of things that are very, very possible that will make you say, huh, why is that standing out? Now, something important you'll notice is I wrote the word deepfake here. Why did I write that in such big font? Because of some of the things we're seeing happening across the nation, right? So some current legislation, 17 states have enacted laws that specifically refer to online impersonation done with an intent to intimidate, bully, threaten, or harass a person through social media sites, email, or other electronic or online communications. Several states have passed legislation aimed at the use of deepfakes, not just exclusively deepfakes generated by AI, but any deepfakes, old school Photoshop, old school other things that we do, through either elections is one area, or another one is non-consensual synthetic intimate images. And the Federal Trade Commission had solicited proposals for products, policies, and procedures aimed at protecting consumers from being harmed by voice cloning. How many of you, boy, lament even trying to answer your phone because you don't know who's calling, what they're actually saying, and all of the details within it. Now, what are we doing in the state of New Mexico? Well, I'm really honored to be part of a state that's been moving really intentionally on this. And you may have been aware of earlier this year, the signing of House Bill 182. It was brought forward by Representative Gail Chasey, Representative Charlotte Little, Representative Katie Duhigg. And this was a really important legislation that came forward. I also want to give in particular shout outs to Alyssa Lauer, who's the Chief of Staff for Representative Chasey, and Dr. Melanie Moses, here a professor at UNM Law, who put in unbelievable countless hours on this work. Now, why am I so hyped about our deepfakes election interference concern statute here? Well, I'll tell you the truth. And I'm not just the one saying it, it's got to be one of the best in the nation. It has got to be one of the very best in the nation, what our colleagues created in this state that has been used in other jurisdictions. I encourage you, go check out what they created in Florida and do a date stamp to see which one came out first. All right, so the act relating to elections, amending and enacting sections of the Campaign Reporting Act by adding disclaimer requirements for advertisements generated by using artificial intelligence, providing disclaimer requirements related to the use of materially deceptive media, and creating the crime of distributing it. And, you know, there's some language that's used in our documents that I think is really cutting edge. And this isn't just me saying it. I was talking with a colleague at another institution who shared that he has been pulling some of the different types of statutes across the nation related to this. And what he has been presenting is that the best definitions that he's come across has been New Mexico in the state of Oregon. Is some of the cleanest defined definitions related to some of this work. So I'll just share with you one of them. Artificial intelligence means a machine-based or computer-based system that through hardware or software uses input data to emulate the structure and characteristics of input data in order to generate synthetic content, including images, video, or audio. So this is already on the books. We're going to keep our eyes on how this impacts or just doesn't get impacted. But our statute, as you'll see in the attachment I have for you, has a lot of good info in terms of the penalties and the size that, you know, however big your deepfake is, has to be as big as the language that says this is a deepfake. However loud the deepfake voice or audio clip is how loud the indication has to be to say, this is a deep fake you're listening to. So I think they did a really nice job, and we're hoping that it continues to be a model across the country. What does this mean in particular for the Black community? Well, you all have heard me talk about this thing that occurred a few years ago, last year, where some scientists asked AI to create images of Black African doctors treating white kids. And the AI just could not do it. It couldn't do it. It could not fathom this notion. When you asked for a Black African doctor, it gave a white doctor treating Black African children. When they asked for, no, I want a Black African doctor treating children, and it came back with a giraffe and children doctors, and it even came with this last image. It just could not fathom within the deep fake, within the images, within the data, what this concept could look like of Black African doctors. And so I always raise this point about global distribution of human skin color. And this isn't 1,000% accurate, but this is from the Encyclopedia Britannica, which was what they consider to be human skin color by the 21st century, kind of where people phenotypically are and the pigmentations of the people within those spaces. Once again, not totally perfect. I don't see my little brown dot for us here in New Mexico, but generally, this is where pigmentations or human skin color will fall in what they have here as the range of human skin color. And you'll notice that most of the world is darker pigmentation than not. And this very interesting paper came out from Bloomberg last summer that said humans are biased, generative AI is even worse. Now, I raise it that this was summer 2023 because it has not gotten much better since then. But we want to keep our eyes on what the researchers are starting to discover. So they used an AI product called Stable Diffusion's text-to-image model that amplified stereotypes about race and gender. And here's what it discovered. Using the Fitzpatrick scale, which is defined as a way to kind of get a sense of skin color. There are 6 different ones from Fitzpatrick scale 1 to Fitzpatrick scale 6. They went through and asked the AI using Stable Diffuser, generate 100 images of lawyers over and over and over and over and over again. And here are the images that it created by phenotype, by skin complexion. Now, what stands out to you? This is just a subset of some of the higher paying occupations that they went through. Lawyers, CEO, judges, engineers. On some level, colleagues, we know the data. This is not an untrue thing. Black Americans or Black people represent 5% of lawyers, even a smaller percentage of judges, just as small as that percentage of engineers. We are aware that this is not an untrue thing. But what becomes complex is when we look at low paying occupations. Now, you're going to look at this and you'll see the skin complexions, the different skin tones that the AI generated images for, and look at housekeeper, janitor, fast food worker, and social worker. And you'll discover that by and large, it has people of a much, much darker complexion than we saw than is actually accurate. That's the part that stands out. And so another fascinating paper by Nature kind of discovered some interesting things, that these AI image generators are often giving racist and sexist results. So take a look at this chart with me. What they notice is that the AI was amplifying false stereotypes. You'll notice in the first image is the dot represents self-identification in the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the diamond represents the AI model output. And what's very fascinating is you'll see how it wasn't too far off as it relates to how people self-identified and what kind of firefighter images it generated. But then it started to basically say almost every taxi driver is going to be a male. Almost every software engineer is going to be a male. Look at where it came up with pilots. It actually decrease the number of male pilots in a way that wasn't quite aligned with the reality. And look what it has for cook in terms of who actually identifies as a cook versus who the AI says is a cook. Look at who the AI thinks is a flight attendant or a housekeeper. Almost 100% housekeeper and nurses were all women. And then when you look on the bottom, when you look at those professions again, in terms of who's white and who's not white, you can see some of the disparity between the racial breakdown of who actually is a software developer versus who the AI thinks a software developer is going to be. When it looks at who actually is, almost 50% of people who are housekeepers are white or identify as white, but the AI said almost 80% were non-white. So what is going on, right? Why does the AI get this sense of how to generate and create people? And Stable Diffusion, that was just, as you can see, the distribution of skin tone. Well, this is what the composite of those images ended up looking like. And this is where we grow gravely concerned, colleagues, right? When we see that the AI already has an idea of what an inmate is going to look like, what a drug dealer is going to look like, what a terrorist is going to look like. And whether that's true or not, the AI is further embedding these falsehoods into people's lexicon and images and what they anticipate things to look like. Here, I just wanted you to get a glance to see what the article determined the janitor looked like, the fast food worker, the CEO, the judge, who is going to likely be the image that the AI is going to generate. We're also watching some covert racism in AI as it relates to language models. How many of you have ever picked up your device and said, hey Siri, hey Google, and asked it to do something or other, and ran into the same thing that I run into, which is that it never quite gets all the words correct. I'm actually always a little wary when I use use the closed caption feature on Zoom or other products, because I'll see that it just doesn't hear me correctly. And I'm thinking, Is it because I talk too quickly? Probably. Is it because of my accent, my little bit of Jersey that comes out every now and then? Is it because I don't enunciate, which I've been told to focus on my enunciation, where they always write? Or is it something deeper? The research is showing us it's that something deeper. It's not just Sonia it doesn't understand. It doesn't understand many people of African heritage in the United States, or this concept, and it actually is ending up showing more falsehoods related to stereotypes, in particular people that are defined as speaking in quote African American English and the things related to that. So that's another paper that came out of Nature earlier this year. We're also watching this other thing. This is being seen almost as a human rights, not almost, it is considered a human rights consideration through the United Nations. And they had an interesting report out earlier this summer on bias from the past leading to bias in the future. Remember, this AI, when it's looking for data, it's gleaning from all of the past to decide who we get to be in the future. Now, we're not completely aware of what the impact will be, because right now we can only look at the computational biases that present in front of each of us. But that's very different than understanding that this comes from a foundation of human biases that are based on a deeper foundation of systemic biases. Right now, we're just on the tip of the iceberg, but we're still not getting all the way to the core of why did the AI do this in the first place? Well, it did it because that's what we do. Well, why do we do this in the first place? Because we're all operating in systems that have put us into these spaces that leads to a lack of fairness. Now, some good news. There are some labs that are working diligently around the clock to create synthetic databases that reduce bias and can possibly preserve privacy. As opposed to the AI learning off of Sonia's face, what if the AI was able to learn off of an intentional lab that was ensuring that all the images created looked a little bit like the world, not just the United States, but the world. People that we're used to seeing and people we're not used to seeing, different skin tones and pigmentations and hair textures and cuts of their jaw and different ways that their bodies present. If the AI could just know we all come a little bit differently. So the SMU lab has been doing some really interesting things in terms of creating more culturally diverse synthetic images. So has the NYU Tandon lab, has been working really intentionally to create Black data sets that can be used. Conclusion, don't worry. The AI is not smart. As it relates to deepfakes, as it relates to all these things, it's not smart. And collaborations are occurring across tech and legal sectors. I encourage you, don't worry. We are actively working on it at this moment. You should totally worry. You should be so worried and so stressed out. I want to make sure you're very clear about this. This one always gets me, right? Who do you believe, me or your lion eyes? Colleagues, I am uncertain of what will happen when you will present rather standard information in front of a jury, what you'll consider to be standard, and the jury will fold their arms and say, I don't believe anything I see. How do you draw back a deep fake that they've already seen someone else present? But that's not how the car accident happened at all. And now that jury's got it in their head, what happens to a population of humans that can't trust what they see or hear or feel or touch? When this idea of the synthetic and the virtual merge and becomes a lot murkier, I don't know if the human brain is ready to parse those distinctions. The other thing that is something you should be very concerned about is the tech is changing so very, very quickly. By the time we come up with our measures and ways to protect against some of these things, we're going to end up watching that system be something that is totally not even something that nefarious actors are trying to use. Oh gosh, so what do we do? Well, this is the last one that I do wrestle with, and I present it to you, colleagues, because I don't know if I've got the right answer, but I've got my gut response, and I'd love more people to tell me we can be okay about this. Should the Black community and other marginalized populations want to be included in data? Not just synthetic data, but actual data. Should it really know the diversity of my experience? Should I really be trying to feed it all of who I am and all of what I bring and all of my ancestors' stories and my hopes and dreams for my children? And the reason why that's really good to do is, well, if the AI is only as good as the data that's fed it, let's feed it all the diversity of our story. However, colleagues, we've got over 400 documented years in this nation, and I've yet to see them use our data for good. What's going to have to change? Well, it's going to be you and I sitting at the table. It's going to be you and I sitting in all of these spaces. It's going to have to be our call to action. What are we going to do about what we're watching happening? Well, step one, you're already doing it. You're here. You gathered with me to hear some of these unique thoughts, right? Awareness, just being aware of what it is and how it works, and knowing how to parse and jump into unique components related to it. What was it? Knowing is half the battle. From G.I. Joe, we learned that back in the 80s. Knowing is half the battle. Already knowing how it works, already knowing when opposing counsel presents something, kind of the questions you're going to want to ask, the things you're going to need to query of your experts to really be clear if that information is accurate or not. And collaboration. We're going to need people that understand it and people that don't understand it as well to work together to get to some of our solutions. So what do we want to do? Here are some takeaways from my dear colleague, Daniel Shin, Professor Shin. If you're trying to look at images, look carefully at available details and see if there are inconsistent visual clues, such as outside shadows not aligning in parallel, people not having 5 fingers. The AI is so good, but it can't figure out the number of fingers we come with. It's generally about 10, but sometimes it's less and sometimes it's more. You can also look for inconsistent sizes of objects, right? So you look at the image, but there's something about it that you're like, huh, are my corrective lenses not quite capturing the nuances? That might be an idea. Something else to look at for all media is find out the life cycle story of how the media came into the courtroom from the moment of the media's creation. This is going to be a big deal that you're going to need to do this for your exhibits. And then you're going to really need to put a lot of attention on your expert witnesses, right? You're going to have to really be looking out there for individuals who know how it works, who knows where there are concerns, whether it is whichever side of the situation you're on, who are really, really intentional about this, and who may be able to conduct limited forensic analysis to determine whether the media has an embedded watermarking indicated it was created with commercially available generative AI tools. But this technique may not work for some of the tools that are being made through open source software that don't have embedded watermarks. Something though that Professor Shin does remind me is this stuff's getting good. It's getting really good, and it will be harder and harder to discern what is accurate and what is not. So it's really going to have to be on us to try and get some of these protections in place before it can impact your trier of fact. But I always want to make sure I'm very clear. I, for one, welcome our AI overlords. When they come for us, I want them to know I was trying to best protect everyone. But you know, this is just a silly joke. I really do think about this a lot. I'm glad to be part of the UNM Algorithmic Justice Project with Dr. Melanie Moses, Dr. Kathy Powers. I think we're in some really complex times that requires us to be thinking about how fairness is going to impact so many of us. So that's our chat for today. We've got just a couple of minutes, but I turn it back over to our Madam President.
Thank you so much, Professor Gipson Rankin. That was very intriguing, a little bit scary, but I'm glad you're doing that work. If anyone has any questions, you can put them down in the Q&A section and we will answer any questions that you may have. Make sure that you put your name and your bar number in the chat as well if you are looking for CLEs today. We thank everyone for coming today. And again, if you have any questions, put them down in the Q&A section. Can you see those? Or do you want me to read?
No, I'm happy to read it. Yeah, so we've got a question. How would we, as a community, refuse to provide our data? The internet is gathering information so quickly. Is it even feasible that we stay out of it? Oh, I think you are on the absolutely right track. I encourage you, I'm putting it in the chat right now. There's a film called Coded Bias. I show this every tech class I teach. I had a great opportunity earlier this year to actually interview the director of the film, but this is a fantastic film that features Dr. Joy Bulwemi as she kind of walks through all the ways we're watching bias through algorithms impact. But what's really interesting is that they have it through, that it's been made available through, what's going on in the UK, where they're working on privacy issues. And so we are seeing some pushback across the world. In China, there's a lot of people who are defacing and kind of hiding all of the cameras that are watching. In England, there are people that are really trying to educate people on their right to not be recorded. But as is kind of stated, it's a little bit harder to do because there's so many places where our data is being gathered, right? My data is being gathered, even if I don't have a Gmail account. If I email a friend with a Gmail account, my data has been gathered. If I, this is why there's laws that say that every time I go to an event, this event is being photographed. You agree by being here that you agree to be photographed. But what we're seeing in particular that I think is harder is that there's been a changing belief about what about me is or is not private. So I come from a previous generation where we really had this idea of get out of my business, stay out of my business. Privacy is everything about me. But we're watching that shift in terms of an idea where people are kind of excited to give up some of their privacy. If I give you this information, then you're going to give me this discount at the store. You're going to help me get a better route to work. You're going to give me better algorithms on the things I want to purchase online. And so because of these changing norms or ideas about it, I don't know if we're going to be able to have many ways because the public understanding of privacy has changed so much.
Absolutely. Any additional questions? Well, again, we thank you all for attending today. We're glad that we were able to present the past 3 days on the past, present, and future. Thank you again, Professor Gipson Rankin. Everyone have a great afternoon.